is like the perfect day. The temperature was amazing. I went to Echo Park Lake today, and this space is awesome. And Misty, thank you so much for allowing us to do this.
Ow!
Thank you guys. I'm really glad so came.
Oh, wait, I just want to say. The whole reason me and Misty were setting up lights in her thing for a potluck, and we were like, Misty's place is so beautiful that we need to use the space for more things. And this fire pit's amazing, and so we were like, we have to use the space, and so we get to use the space. And so thank you, Misty, for making a beautiful space.
Yeah.
Misty.
It really does.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks for building this beautiful space.
Cheers.
Being available to share it with.
Yeah. Just a couple quick questions or things, I guess. One is, so are we recording? Are we okay with being recorded?
Yeah, is everybody okay with that? If I'm recording Matt, I can make sure it stays on him.
Well, then you can,
if anybody would like to object, or I guess maybe not even force people to object. What do we think?
just don't turn all the way around.
You got it.
And then the other thing I was going to mention is that we don't know yet what the next one is going to be, but we want it to be in 2 months. And so if you have an idea germinating that you're like, I have something, a 17-minute something that I want to volunteer, talk to Dave about it afterwards, or even if it's afterwards.
Yes. And do you think, because I know that maybe we discussed you doing the second one, but is that going to happen or not?
I have an idea,
Okay.
and it's formulating. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the idea is we're going to do bi-monthly things like this, and we're going to ask people like, if you have something you want to share, that'll be great. The whole idea is we're going to give a talk, and then we can discuss, like the Salon. We weren't there in the 1890s, but a lot of people think the 1890s was pretty cool. And they used to have old salons and get together and like talk about ideas and things. And we have talks at the Zen Center every week. Always about Zen, somebody gives a talk, and then we have like a Q&A afterwards, and like this whole comment discussion that happens is great, but it's always about Buddhism, and we were like, you know what? Maybe there are other topics in the world. And this whole format of discussing over great with other topics. So we're curious to see what can happen with that.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's get back to the floor.
Yay.
So, let's go back to 2019. Around my birthday, which is May 5th, which is coming up. So in 2019, around my birthday, I read a book by Robert Anton Wilson. Has anybody, I know that you've checked out Robert Anton Wilson. So he wrote a book called Cosmic Trigger, and I had read him several years before, but I had never read Cosmic Trigger. It was always on my list. It sounded like a really interesting book. I don't know why it took me so long to actually even get around to reading that book. So that year, I finally read Cosmic Trigger, and I had watched videos on YouTube of people talking about that book, and they would say weird things like after they read that book, weird synchronicities would happen to them and stuff, which, maybe so. And Robert Anton Wilson, he was a self-proclaimed agnostic mystic, so he was very interested in mystical matters, but he was also skeptical about any conclusions. But he was always willing to suspend his skepticism during experiments. And Cosmic Trigger is basically a documentation of weird things that happened to him as a result of experimenting with different magical practices and spiritual practices and stuff. So I read that in 2019, and the main effect that it had on me was that I wanted to start having a more experimental spirituality. And so I wanted to just experiment with different practices and magical techniques and stuff just to see what would happen, basically. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't have any set expectations necessarily, but I wanted to open myself up to... It was a playful, experimental spirituality that I wanted to embrace and pursue. So, one of the things that I started to do, coming out of that inspiration of reading Cosmic Trigger, I bought my own tarot deck. And I think I bought it for myself for my birthday in 2019. some people who are into tarot that are more superstitious about it, they say, don't buy your own deck. But I don't really care about that. I bought my own deck. And it was a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And the Rider-Waite-Smith is, even if you're not really familiar with tarot, it's probably the cards that you've seen. It's the most popular deck in the world. Traditionally, people would say the the Rider-Waite deck, because those are the two dudes who created it. But nowadays, people say Rider-Waite-Smith for good reason, because Pamela Coleman Smith made the art of that deck, and that's why the deck is so fucking cool in the first place. She was awesome, and thank God people say Rider-Waite-Smith now. So I got the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which I still have to this day, which I still love, and feeling this surge of enthusiasm about it because of how the cards are kind of rich archetypal symbols and imagery, and because you could kind of read the cards as a map for some sort of transformation or self-empowerment or hero's journey. It's the fool's journey, right? It's the fool's journey because the Rider-Waite-Smith deck and most tarot decks have 78 cards, and 22 of those cards are the major arcana, and then the other 56 are the minor arcana. I'm more interested in the major arcana. I mean, like, I could be fine just using that and not even messing with the minors, to be honest, but that's just me. So once I started experimenting with the tarot, I was reading books about it, I was looking at the cards, I was journaling about it, I was looking at the images, I was reflecting on it and trying to come up with my own interpretations of these cards. And I was doing readings for myself, and I was doing readings for my friends, and it was really fun. Some of the first readings I remember giving to David over here, and they were really nice. So since I was so excited about it, I was doing at least one reading for myself every week, just because it was fun. You know what I'm saying? And in the first couple months of doing readings for myself, I kept on fucking getting the Chariot card. Like, it was, not in every reading, but way more than any other card that was popping up. And I'm just like, this is weird, I didn't know, I wasn't being like, oh, this means this one thing or anything. It was just like, this is interesting. The Chariot card. Oh my God, that was the Chariot card.
You play that.
Chariot card.
I swear to God. And yeah, it is. Yeah. So, I kept getting the Chariot card, right? And then I read a book called the Mother Peace Tarot Guide book, because the Mother Peace is a whole different deck, and it's amazing, and it's all the cards are circular. Oh my God. So anyways, it really wants to speak to us. So I read this tarot book among many of the other tarot books I was reading, and they have this thing in the book where it was like you can kind of calculate what your supposed soul card is, and you can calculate what your card of the year is for each year. So this was still in 2019. After getting the Chariot card several times in my readings, I calculate my supposed soul card from the book, Chariot card. Promise you, I swear on my mother's life. Calculated my card of 2019, Chariot card. And I'm like, this is fucking weird, And again, it's not like, it was just a curiosity and something that was kind of bizarre. And it felt cool. It felt like magical and enchanting. So fast forward a couple months after that, and my ex-girlfriend and I, after months of when we would walk down the sidewalks around our apartment, there was just a shit ton of trash everywhere, and I didn't like that. I mean, I would walk back and I would walk around the sidewalks and I would complain about the trash. And then we were finally like, well, let's pick up the trash, So we created this ritual every Tuesday night where we would go out there. I had a little, trash picker. I would pick up all the trash. She had a little poop scooper. She would pick up all the poop, and we would fill up these massive bags, these massive trash bags. And it was a nice little Tuesday night ritual. The first night that we ever did that, I was walking down the sidewalk picking up trash, and I reached a certain spot where it was a little grassy spot, and there was kind of random shit everywhere, you know, and some trash, some like, you know, like a one shoe, you know, just random stuff. And I see a card on the ground, and I automatically kind of know, and it was the card that just kept, this specific card that kept falling down. I kind of could tell it was a tarot card just by the art, even though it wasn't the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but it was definitely, it's based off the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. But I reached down and I grabbed the card, and it is the Chariot card.
Oh.
So I'm like, oh my god, what? And you know, of course I'm like, all right, well, somebody just threw out their tarot deck, and there's probably a bunch of other tarot cards around here, you know what I mean? Which probably that's what happened, you know. But nevertheless, I look around and I'm looking for other tarot cards. I don't find any, and I look pretty diligently. I don't find any other cards. There's just the Chariot card, face up, shining under the street light in the dark. And I'm like, pretty, you know, I felt poetically, I felt like the tarot gods and goddesses were winking at me. And honestly, as a playful interpretation of it, it was kind of like, well, we're taking the agency to pick up this trash we've been complaining about. It was a small gesture, it was a small act, but nevertheless, like, we're taking some sort of action. And that is kind of like what the Chariot card embodies in the first place. So that was kind of cool. So that's a story that introduces my relationship with the tarot. And I'm going to pass around. This is the card I found on the ground. So that's the Chariot card from a deck that I haven't been able to identify, actually, but it's definitely based on the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's just not exactly
That's
like
the
it.
one you found?
This is the one I found on the ground.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, that is the one you found.
That's the one I found on the ground. Yeah. So I wanted to now just like briefly kind of go over my take on cards 0 through 7 in the Major Arcana. Because like I said, the Major Arcana is 22 cards. So there's the 0 card, which is the Fool card, and then there's 21 other cards. And those 21 cards, the way I mean, and I'm influenced by other people, but I like to break it into 3 sets of 7. So there's the 21 cards that are broken into 3 sets of 7. And the first set is what I'm going to talk about tonight. Maybe in the future I could talk about the second and third or whatever. But the way I kind of have mapped it out is like the first 7 are about self-empowerment in some capacity. The second 7 are about deconstructing the self. And then the third set is kind of about some sort of rebirth or reintegration into the world, having broken down the self or something, right? So, card 0, which I can pass around, the Fool card, the beloved Fool card. Like I said, I see it as the Fool's journey. So, like, just like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, I see the Major Arcana cards as like the Fool's journey. So, I think of the Fool as each of us, you know? Each of us is the Fool. And we're going through this journey, basically, right? And so the Fool is card 0, and he's like a minimalistic wanderer who has this really small little bag on a stick, and he's seemingly about to jump off this cliff. So he's like leaping into the unknown, basically. So the Fool card, the Fool on the Fool card, is about to leap into the unknown. And he's got a white flower too, which people usually link to some sort of purity. The way I think about the Fool is that he represents the beginner's mind. And he's card 0, so he hasn't entered into the world of duality, you know. So that's the Fool, and that's our hero or protagonist, or each of us is the Fool. And so the first step that the Fool takes is into the Magician card, which is card 1. And the Magician has all of the tools of the Minor Arcana on the table. He's got the cup, he's got the sword, he's got the wand, and he's got the pentacle strewn on the table for him. So, and he's got one hand pointed up and one hand pointed down. And so the magician is like, and he's got the infinity symbol over his head. So he's like channeling the infinite, you know, however you want to see that. He's channeling infinity or emptiness and channeling it into this material plane. And he's using the tools at his disposal to use magic. And the way that I think about magic is this one guy named Joseph Louvre, which is like he's a historian of magic. And one line that Joseph Louvre says is, he says, magic is dehypnotizing us from our own powerlessness. Dehypnotizing us from our own powerlessness. That's what the magician represents. And his power comes from beyond him. He doesn't own it. It's coming from beyond. It's coming from the infinite or the transcendent or God or the spirit or whatever you want to call it. And but he's bringing it into this finite realm. So yes, the Fool taps into the magician inside of him as his first step along the journey. Then card 2 is the High Priestess, and the High Priestess is, every time I look at this card I think of Emily Dickinson. She's like the Emily Dickinson in us all. And what you see in the major arcana is like, it's always this constant like balancing act, you know? It's like it goes far in this direction and then it like recalibrates or whatever. So after the magician, who in some ways is kind of emphasizing the external, the High Priestess is like going within, and she's kind of like, I don't really care about the external that much. I'm just gonna go into my own intuition. She's usually linked with intuition. She's got a massive crescent moon that is at her feet. Her robe at the end of it looks like these ocean waves. So she's got this like ocean imagery, lunar imagery, all about intuition and inherent wisdom, I would say. And she's got the Torah in her hand, so she's like reflective and spiritual and studying wisdom, right? And then so that kind of balances out the magician in a certain way. And then you go to card 3, which is the Empress card. She's a fucking badass. Sorry, I didn't pass around the magician, my bad. And then I'll pass the Empress that way. The Empress is awesome. She just like makes me feel good when I look at her. You could say that the Empress is a blend between the magician and the High Priestess. And so the way I read the Empress is that she's saying, wait, the sacred is also on the outside too. She's like, she loves beauty, she loves nature, she's like kind of flamboyant, and she's just like out there doing her thing. And so she's, you know, in some ways the High Priestess is kind of like a hermit, and then the Empress is like, I'm going outside, you know? And she's connected with like the natural cycles and stuff, and she's got the stars on her crown, and a lot of decks present her as almost like, I mean, some decks have her with like a baby and stuff, so she's got kind of like this mother or mother nature vibe. So then after the Empress, then you have the Emperor card, which is card 4. And the Emperor card, when I first started studying the tarot, out of the major arcana cards, the Emperor card was the one where I was like, this guy's kind of an asshole. Like, I don't know what to do with this dude. Like, he just seems really rigid, and he seems kind of like just grumpy and like not a lot of fun to be around, you know? But symbolically, archetypally, I would say that the Emperor is important because he does, I mean, each of these cards to me has like a light side and a shadow side, you know? So it's like if you go too far in one direction, you're gonna be a little bit fucked, you know? So it's like the shadow side of the Emperor is that overly controlling asshole. And then the light side is like, well, we do need structure and discipline and a foundation, you know, in our lives, just to a certain degree. So he's on this like stone throne, and he's got this really like very solid looking chunky mountain behind him, and so he's kind of like balancing out maybe the shadow side of the Empress, where he's like, well, no, it can't just be completely free-form spontaneity. We have to have a little structure here, you know? And so, and then after the Emperor, you have the Hierophant, and this spiritual teacher, basically, or a teacher of some sort, who's sitting on a throne, and he's got two pupils or students at his feet. And I would say my reading of that is that the Hierophant is taking the structure and the discipline from the Emperor and bringing it into being a student. Like, and so instead of being willy-nilly about the fool, right, if we come back to the fool, instead of the fool being just like completely willy-nilly about what he wants to, how he wants to find meaning and truth and wisdom, he's like going to be a little bit more structured about that, or you know, and to and there's because with the Hierophant card you can either identify with the teacher or you can identify with the students, you know, so it kind of depends on where each individual is. But for me, I take it as like identifying with the student and like humbling yourself to learn from the people who have something to teach you, and not only people, but you know, experiences and that sort of thing. So that's the Hierophant, and then it goes into the Lover's card, which has a naked man and a naked woman that are seemingly about to like I don't know, become unified in some way or experience union. Not to say that it's explicit that they're about to have sex, but you could definitely read that. But yeah, like they're about to experience some sort of union, you know? And so that step along this first set of the major arcana, it's like they're the Fool is confronting, and I think of the Fool as kind of androgynous too, so we'll say the Fool is confronting the need to balance the masculine and feminine, and that's definitely not it doesn't have to be literally gendered. I think it's just the kind of the spectrum inside of us, whether we think about that as receptivity and action, or think about it as intuition and rationality, or passivity and activity, or creativity and order, whatever it might be, right? So the Lover's card is about like confronting the need to balance the different parts of us, right? And it's cool because up to that point you have like these masculine figures and these feminine figures, and then it's kind of like this switch back and forth, and then the Lover's card is like unifying them in some way. And then after the Lover's card, you have our old friend, the Chariot card, and you could say that the Chariot, just like all the other cards, the Chariot is absorbing all the other cards that came before it. And so in the card itself, you can see the Charioteer. He's got the wand from he's got the wand of the magician. He's got crescent moon imagery from the High Priestess. He's got kind of like the flamboyance of the Empress. He's got the intentionality and structure of the Emperor, and he's got the receptivity of the Hierophant, the humility, and like and he has he's got these two yin and yang sphinxes that are kind of guiding him, but he doesn't have a what do you call it, like he doesn't have reins, like he's just not holding anything, but the yin and yang sphinxes are like co-guiding him. And you could say that like the yin and yang, the masculine, feminine, and so he's absorbed all the cards that have come before him, and the Chariot is about to go into the next the first step of the next leg of the journey, which is the strength card. And maybe we'll talk about that sometime in the future. But that's basically it.
Woo!
That's your talk.
That's my talk.
Okay, so here's what happens now. So it's a salon, so we want people to talk and join in and have like a conversation. The idea is that we want it to be a, what's the word? A nice
Forum?
conversation.
Forum?
Forum. That's the word.
I felt it.
So let me give a few guidelines for how forums work best productively with groups of people. First rule, major rule, no interrupting each other. You know what I mean? Like people get popcorn, get excited, we want to say things like, let somebody have their full speaking. Which means a couple of things. If you're somebody who is not prone to speaking, we want to hear what you have to say. Please speak up and say something. If you're somebody who's prone to always speaking in groups, maybe give space for other people and be aware of time and space when you speak in groups. You know, these things are going to be aware of, but we really want to hear what everybody has to say, and we want a conversation to happen. So I'm not going to call on people. That'd be weird. That would make it feel, I don't know, a little less journey-ish. But let's, I've always liked, you guys know Quakers? I love Quakers.
Yeah.
Quakers are great. They sit there, and when somebody like feels moved by God, do what you want with that, to speak, they speak.
Yeah.
And then there's space. The next person speaks.
Wait. Is there water?
I thought you were making space for God.
He's gonna have water
I
to
need
do that.
to quench life.
Hydration?
There's the whole bars over there still. There's soda, water, whatever you need is over there.
Regular.
Yeah.
It looks like there's a bottle of regular water.
Oh no.
At the very least, if all the water's gone,
Do people need a break?
suckle at the tap over there.
Yeah. Okay, let's take 5 minutes. Let's take 10 minutes.
Suckling.
And then I'll carnival bark you all back here. We'll come back around the fire and we'll have a group forum about that discussion. Yeah?
Ow, ow.
Wait, what just happened?
It's 8:31. At 8:40, I'm gonna yell at you
We're
all.
having a break? After we worked so hard to get uncomfortable?
I know. Apparently, yes.
All right.
At 8:30. No, it's 8:31. At 8:40, I'm gonna yell at you all. And 8:41, we'll be back here
All right.
for a forum to talk about.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.